Howdy, golfers! Welcome to my podcast. I'm your host, Jason. 欢迎来到高尔夫牛仔播客，我是 Jason。大家听出来了吧？没错，我是美国土生土长的 ABC。作为一名 PGA 成员，我已经打球超过25年，在中国教学超过了10年。在这过程中，我遇到了无数高尔夫热爱者以及学生家长所面临的问题。因此，每集播客的话题都会用最真诚、客观的方式来讨论各种通病、痛点。从高尔夫教学到心理学、教育及培养计划等等，希望带给所有听众不同角度的认知以及思维。你们准备好了吗？这是欢迎来到高尔夫牛仔播客，我是 Jason。我今天的来宾呢，也在中国非常久的时间，我也期待了很久能够跟他一起做这个播客。他异国他乡来到中国26年，自己有学院，也在中国看到了非常多的青少年一起成长。我们想欢迎一下我们教父级别的 Andrew Smith。
大家好，
欢迎。我们接下来播客，你觉得想要用中文还是英文呢？
我今天还是跟你讲英文，因为我可以跟你说清楚一点。
OK， 好，没问题，那我们就用英文接下来说的。So Andrew, what got me curious was, how 26 years in China. How has that been?
Well, a lot of it was down to curiosity. I come from a golfing background, third generation golf professional. My father was a PGA professional for over 60 years. 3 of my great uncles were golf professionals, one of them being a British Open champion a long time ago. But I wanted to come to China, to a country which I knew very little about, but felt as though I could give something back and help develop the golf industry here. At the same time, learn about Chinese culture.
How did you pick it? Because I think at that time golf wasn't popular here, and the golf wasn't popular in a lot of places. But how did you pick China?
Well, it's quite funny, really. I actually was looking to work overseas. I very nearly took a job in Singapore, but I heard a story about a guy who'd come to China and stayed one night and then left the following day. I never found out why he left.
Okay.
But I inquired with the person he'd been working for where the golf club was, and it was a very well-known golf course here in Shenzhen, Sand River. So I applied, contacted the people, see if they wanted a coach, and 4 days later I was sat on a plane. I had sold my car, gave my house contents away, bought the ticket, and arrived in Hong Kong 4 days later. Spent one night in Hong Kong, then the second day came over the border and started teaching straight away.
That's interesting, because my story on how I came to China was a very similar kind of sense, but I literally at that time I Googled China golf, and the first place that came up was Mission Hills.
Right.
And so that's how I ended up coming into China. But not as long as you have.
All my communication back in 98 was through fax and emails.
Oh, wow.
So I really had no idea what I was walking into. I say 4 days is a very short time to get yourself organized to move overseas. But I came here with the attitude was, if I don't like it, I can go. Or if China doesn't like me, I can leave.
Yeah.
And I think coming here, I was 26 when I came. I was very open-minded. I like to think that I was courteous and respectful, wanting to learn the culture, wanting to learn the language, and try to basically just do the right thing.
I mean, for a lot of people that don't know, Andrew's actually pretty fluent in Chinese.
大部分的时候我教球还是用中文，因为以前我刚来的时候，我还是用一个翻译。我上班差不多1年，后来我听我的翻译讲，我感觉我的学生不明白我的意思，
所以自己讲了。
所以后来我这里还是给我的翻译说，不好意思，我还是这里来，还是慢慢来会讲一点。
哇，你看这不容易的，不容易的。 现在中国通了。
还是学生，还是学生。
So I mean, you mentioned you came out here at 26.
Yeah.
How was that transition? Because I remember I was 21 when I first came out here, and I know for the first few months, even though I spoke Chinese, I'm a ABC, right, American born
Right.
Chinese. I should know the culture, but I think actually being out here is a lot different.
When I look back to my image of China, growing up as a child, you'd see reports on the BBC News about China, and they would always show, the famous landmarks in Beijing, and everybody wearing blue suits and bicycles.
Yeah.
So that was the image I had in my head when I first came out here, and of course, it's nothing like that. The Western media give a very different outlook on China, and I found it a very exciting city, a very exciting place to be.
Right. I had a very similar experience as well, because even though I had to go to Chinese school after school, and you learn about China, you learn the history of it. I watched a lot of Chinese drama growing up. That's how I learned a lot of my Chinese as well. But then actually, I think being out here, especially being in a city like Shenzhen, where it's developed so quickly,
Right.
That image of, just people on a bicycle in Beijing,
Right.
that kind of just destroys all
blown
of that,
out of
doesn't
the
it?
window.
Exactly,
Yeah.
exactly.
When I first came out here, I really had no preconception of what it was going to be like. I didn't have time to think about it. I remember sitting on the aeroplane flying over, and that's when it hit me. I was the only foreigner on the plane, which, I came from a very multicultural background. The city I grew up in the UK, so I had classmates and school friends from all over the world, all different ethnic backgrounds. So I'm sat on the aeroplane. I'm the only white guy on the plane for 300 plus Chinese people. That's when it hit me. I had no idea where I was going, and it hit me that perhaps not everyone's going to speak English.
So when you landed, how was that experience? What was did you have any challenges, or what was?
I spent one night in Hong Kong, and I was well looked after by the person who introduced me to the job here. He was a Hong Kongese guy. His name's Patrick. He put me up in a nice hotel. Next morning, 6 o'clock, I got up early and walked around Hong Kong, and I thought, this is very much like the UK. The signposts were in English. And it was very quiet at 6 in the morning. People were just getting up, so it wasn't too busy. But then when I came across the border, that's when it started to hit me. It's different.
It's different. It's definitely.
And certainly back in 1998, it's very different to how it is now. I obviously enjoyed it. I wouldn't have stayed if I hadn't enjoyed it. But the simple things, when I lived maybe 1 kilometer, 1.5 kilometers away from the golf course, and I would take a taxi to get to work. And every day I had to go in my wallet, get my name card out and hold it up and point to the name card and say, I couldn't even say, this is where I want to go. So I was hold it up, they'd nod, and off we go. So even getting to work was a challenge.
Wow. What was the first word you learned in Chinese?
I don't think I can repeat that.
That's usually how we start, isn't it?
It's certainly one of the, maybe not the first word, but one of the early ones, yeah. Of course, you've got to learn how to ask for beer and say thank you and be polite. So, yeah, there's a few curse words in there as well.
Well, I always say you learn the curse words first to defend yourself, so you know what people are yelling you on and what they're mad at you at.
I tried to avoid getting into those situations.
Wow. Were there any other foreigners in Shenzhen at that time that you knew of?
Certainly there were foreigners in Shenzhen. In the area in Shirkou, there was a big population of the oil workers. But I tended to be busy during the day with work, and then after work, as part of the culture, I would be out for dinner, KTV and drinks with clients every single day. So I didn't spend much time with other foreigners. I could perhaps see 2 other foreigners in the space of a 2 or 3 week period.
That is quite different from my when I came over. I think there was a lot more of a foreign presence, I guess, in the golf industry, especially up at Mission Hills.
Certainly in the golf industry and at Mission Hills, it was I always describe it as being a bit of a bubble. I tended to do the opposite. I steered away from the foreigners, not because I didn't like them, I just didn't know them. And also I was making friends, you know, I was made very welcome. I got very lucky coming in early. I had some success with some students.
Yeah.
The golf club actually did a very good job of promoting me. I was on billboards all around the golf club on the roadside. I think it was in my second year when I could speak a little bit of Chinese. I did 3 years of CCTV5. I was actually the first golf professional to teach golf on Chinese national TV.
That's awesome. How was that experience?
I got duped, to be honest. When they first came, they said, okay, well, you can do it all in English and we'll put the subtitles at the bottom. And then on the day that we filmed, they said, no English. So I had to learn the Chinese that I was going to say for the episode on the morning that I was doing it.
Did you have to do a full lesson, or what did you...
We chose topics, so we focused whether it was on bunker play or whether it was on the posture and the fundamentals, so it varied. But we did that for 3 years.
Wow.
So, yeah, that got me very good exposure in China.
So you've been in Zhenzhong when you first came. You're still in Zhenzhong. Well, now it's Yingxiu.
Right.
How was that change? How did you see, you know, I guess my question would be not just, you know, golf in Shenzhen or golf in, you know, at Zhenzhong. How did you see the whole golf spectrum change as a whole?
Well, when I first arrived in China, as you mentioned at the start, there were very few people playing golf. Most of the customers were from Hong Kong, Taiwan, business owners, factory owners. So there was no background in golf. There was only 16 Chinese golf professionals in the whole country.
Okay.
So the first generation, obviously, Zhang Lingwei and Chen Jun, Wu Xiangbing, but they were all friends of mine and still are, because they were curious. They wanted, you know, to meet the foreigner, and one or two of them I actually gave them some lessons, helped them. But very quickly I focused on junior golf development. So I helped to set up junior programs, summer camps, long-term programs where children could experience golf, enjoy golf. Then I think it was in 1999, possibly 2001, I forget the year exactly, but Tiger Woods came to China.
Right.
And I was very fortunate. The children that he played with were all my students. So
that's awesome.
To experience that was fantastic. Also, it brought a lot of new interest in the game. Obviously, Tiger Woods, even as a non-golfer, people had heard of him. So that was quite an experience. That was actually up at Mission Hills. And I never forget seeing 10,000 people running after Tiger Woods, across greens, through bunkers, wearing high-heeled shoes. It was quite an experience, to say the least.
Very different from golf nowadays.
Yeah, very different.
So, you know, looking at how golf is developed over the years, I kind of want to go into more on, you know, the junior development.
Right.
How did you, you know, develop the next kind of juniors in China? How did that happen?
I think teaching juniors, you've got to get on their wavelength. You've got to understand what they want. They want to have fun. They want to be playing games. They want to enjoy it. And I think that as an adult, a lot of adults tend to forget. So I've always tried to set up a friendly, welcoming environment where the children feel relaxed and develop their interests first. There's too much, I feel as though there's too much emphasis on being the best, and you have to be full-time and so on. Having a well-rounded education is more important than being pushed into the game. I started golf, as I say, when I was probably 3 or 4. My father, as a golf professional, always made me aware of how important it was to work hard, but I was never pushed. So if you develop the interest and the passion for the game with the children early on, it makes teaching them easier. They're more willing to listen. They're more willing to practice. They want it themselves. So that's what I've always tried to do.
I couldn't agree more. I think, over the years of teaching, I think what you mentioned right there is almost key to, building a more long-term passion for golf, right? If they're not interested from the start, no matter how much you push as a parent, the kid's not getting it, right?
It doesn't work.
It doesn't work. And then, the parents are frustrated, the kid's frustrated, and the coach are frustrated as well, right?
And down the line, the children give up.
I think that's the biggest concern for a lot of the parents, right? Is because I think one of the problems that you mentioned there was, kids, at least the way I see it, they don't have as much time to allocate into golf or into other extracurricular activities. So then I think when parents choose golf, they end up going, okay, well, it's all or nothing in that sense, right?
I think it's important, as I say, to have a well-rounded education. So from the age, people often ask, how old can my child start learning? One of my best students at the moment, he's 9 years old. At 2 years of age, his father wanted me to teach him, and I said no. I said, bring him back at 4 years of age and we'll have a look. And he started at 2. I gave him free use of the academy to encourage him. I didn't want to put him off and say, no, you can't do it.
Yeah.
He's now been learning with me for 5-6 years, and he's just come back from the US. He qualified the last 2 years for the IMG World Junior Championships. He's doing great, and he loves it. And I'm actually now teaching third generation of people here. So my students who were 5, 6, 7 years of age when they started with me have now obviously grown up. They've got their own families. And that's really what I focus on now. Giving kids the right start.
I think that's very important, because I think if kids have that passion, they have that interest, no matter what kind of challenge that they'll face, and they will have challenges in golf, right? Yeah. Golf, I think a lot of people misconceive golf as being a linear development, right? Where you literally just go from point A to point B, and if you put in the time, if you put in the work, you'll get better immediately, right? It's almost like a knowledge thing, but just like in life, golf doesn't really work that way.
No.
You have a good day, and then the next day immediately.
Doesn't even have to be the next day. Even the second round in the afternoon.
Exactly. Yeah. Exactly. And then all hell breaks loose then, right? So if they have that passion, then they'll find ways to overcome it.
This is one of the beauties of golf as opposed to other sports. As children, as you say, you're going to be faced with lots of challenges, and learning to handle those challenges, how you recover from having bad days, helps build character. And one thing I also try and do is work closely with the parents to help them have a good understanding that it's not just about the golf. You're helping develop, good young people, so they can then have a good future, not just look at Tiger Woods and say, my child's going to be the next Tiger Woods. Your child is your child. You want them to be an individual, and if golf is part of their future, great. Whether it's as a professional career, being a coach, as a player, playing the Olympics, whatever it might be, if golf's part of their life, it'll lead to many good things.
I think everybody hopes that their kids are Tiger Woods.
Of course.
But there's only one Tiger in the world, isn't there?
Right. Even Tiger Woods' son isn't Tiger Woods.
That's true. That's true. He just played the Junior M. But I think a lot of it is he also understands. I think the biggest part, what surprised me about Tiger was him being Tiger, and how, he's got that strong mental game. When it comes to his son, he actually takes a back seat in a lot of it, right? He doesn't backseat coach.
He's probably,
but he's an observer.
Obviously, growing up, I don't know him personally, but growing up, I think he had quite a strict upbringing regarding his golf. His father's military background, where he's probably backed off a little bit from where his father was in his coaching, and wants his son not to be under so much pressure. But there's pluses and minuses for both sides.
I think he also looks at it as the long game, right? Because I think everybody hits different peak at different times. Whereas his son is now, 14, 15, around that age. he might not be peaking like Tiger did back in the day, right? It might be later on.
Yeah.
I think from my experiences, and I try to tell parents as well, is golf is a long-term game, right? You don't actually, I mean, there was a study that was saying golfers don't usually peak until they're at least 21.
When I'm teaching the sort of younger children who's 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 years of age, and they play a tournament, because obviously the parents are often keen for the children to compete and see how they gauge compared to the other children. Finishing second or finishing third or fifth are all good results. Every tournament there's only one child who can win. The times you don't win, you can learn more. And I always ask one question I ask the parents is, do you want him to win this junior tournament this week, or do you want him to win the China Open in 10 years' time? Which one's more important? And of course, they always choose the professional tournament 10 years down the line. It's patience.
Failure is part of the success.
It's part of the success, yeah. And finishing second or third is not failure.
Yeah.
You know, and you consider how many people are in China. Just to be in that environment and experiencing playing golf tournaments is a great achievement.
That's true. That's true. Yeah, because I think a lot of people end up, they want the results right now, especially this day and age, right?
Yeah.
Where things are instant. Things, you got TikTok, you got short clips, you got all of these that are instant gratification.
Yeah.
But golf is a marathon, isn't it?
I think that's partly, obviously, we're here in Shenzhen, and Shenzhen's culture is quite closely reflected with Hong Kong culture. Very quick, everything happens, as you say, instantly. And of course, with the technology these days, people think it's going to happen, very quickly. But one thing you can't rush is experience.
Yep.
You have to go out there for years and years and work hard and make mistakes. You'll have some success on the way, but it's not all about, as I say, it's not linear. It's not always going forward. Sometimes you get knocked back.
I always love using the analogy of, going to the gym, right? A lot of people want to go to the gym to, either gain muscle or lose weight, right? Or to stay healthy.
Yeah.
But they go to the gym once, they go back home, look in the mirror and go, and I didn't gain anything or I didn't lose anything.
I think like anything in life, you get in, you get out what you put in. And trying to, educate the parents and trying to help the golfers, whether it's juniors or the parents, understand what they have to put in and how they can help the best way, because it's not just the golf coach who can do this. If you want to get success, you need cooperation with the parents, with the schools. There's a lot of things at work to get.
Takes a village.
Takes a village.
Takes a village.
Takes a village. Takes a team to do it.
That's awesome. I kind of want to move into, because you mentioned how kids development here is a little bit different, especially at the start when you were here.
Right.
Can you elaborate on how, growing up in the UK, how junior development is a little different than junior development in China?
I think one of the key differences is the schooling system. Obviously, in China, children are under a lot of pressure to get into the best universities. Not everybody wants their child to be a golf professional, but because there's so much time taken up on study, it leaves very little time for sport in general. And in the early years of playing sport, regardless of which sport you're playing, being active helps to develop the child as an athlete. And these skills should be learned before you try to teach the child how to swing a golf club. So one challenge has always been is having enough free time to have other activities outside of golf at an early age. When I was growing up, I probably played at least a dozen different sports.
Yeah, same.
And you're always outdoors and active. We had the advantage of not having iPhones, which distracted us. We also enjoyed it. We weren't under so much pressure to study.
Yeah.
You still got to study overseas, but there was a very different mentality.
Right. And when kids, I think kids get off at different times after school, right?
Right.
I think, at least for me, I got off at 3 p.m.
Right.
I could just carry a bag, walk across and hit balls for a few hours. But it's harder to do that here in
living in a city which is so competitive. Then it is challenging. You know, as a golf coach, you want the best for all your students, whether they're children or adults. So you have to help people to understand that if you don't put the time in, you're not going to get those results.
Yeah.
So, you've got to make a lot of sacrifices. If you're going to reach the top level, you have to make sacrifices. And what some of those sacrifices might be learning the piano or other things.
And I think that's one of the hardest things for parents to decide, like what's a sacrifice, because it's almost like an investment, but you're investing time as well, right? Which in an investment in money sense, you can make that money back sometimes, but time you can't get back. So, I mean, I guess what would you recommend parents to kind of decide, right? What to sacrifice or what to invest time in?
It's really down to the individual. I think at an early age, you give your child as many opportunities. And as they get older, anywhere between 10, 12, 13 years of age, your child will tend to favor one activity. And then perhaps at that point, you then cut back on some of the other activities. And if they're showing more interest in golf, try and make more time for them to do that. One of the other challenges here in Shenzhen or in China is the amount of on-course time that children get. You're never going to play a golf tournament of any stature in a driving range. So you need to get your kids on the golf course every opportunity. And of course, golf in China is not quite as accessible. When I was growing up, to buy a membership of a golf club in the UK, in those days, it was about £100 for a junior membership, so about 1,000 RMB for a year. And there were some restrictions. You couldn't possibly play at 9 o'clock on a Saturday morning, but on many occasions during the summer holidays, I'd be on the golf course playing 54 holes in a day.
That's a lot.
I'd be carrying my own bag as well. We didn't have caddies. We didn't have golf carts.
See, that is very important. I think a lot of kids miss that side of it. Is when we grew up, we had to carry our own bags, or in the best case scenario, you got to push your own bag. But either way, you got your fitness in, but you also got a chance to play, and it was an opportunity to play.
The other thing, I think, when golf is a very much an individual. There are team events, but a very individual sport, and you're out there with your clubs facing the ball and the golf course, and you have to deal with those challenges yourself. So you're making a lot more decisions yourself. There's a lot less outside influences. And one thing I do with all my students, regardless of their age, is encourage them to not use the caddies. When I say not use the caddies, keep the caddy involvement out of this decision making as much as possible. One of my pet hates is when the caddies are lining the ball up on the green. And it's comical. It really is a pet hate. I don't want to focus on that too much, but I'm pleased to say none of my students in the last 26 years who are on the golf course with me are allowed to have the caddy getting involved on the greens.
I couldn't agree more. I tell my students before we play, and I tell the caddy before we play, please do not line his ball up for him. I think at first the student might struggle a little bit. They might take a lot more time, and as an adult, especially if you're a parent, you want to jump in and kind of do it for them. But then they don't develop the skills as you keep mentioning, right? It's not just about golf technique. What I get from your message is golf is a lot more than just a swing. It's a lot on skill and life skills in general, but that takes time to develop.
That's right. So the less involvement caddies have, the quicker the child will develop, because they're having to use their brain a lot more to make decisions on how far is it to the green, which direction should I play, should I use this club. These are all life challenges or golf challenges. You need to make those decisions yourself.
And I think the more that they're involved in the decision making, the more they're interacting with the game, and then the more it kind of deepens that passion for it.
Even when coaching as a coach, as a professional PGA professional, as a coach, you, rather than just tell the students they have to do it this way, you discuss it with them, you get their feedback and try and interact with them, because as we all know, there's not one way to swing a golf club.
That's right.
People often ask me, what's my teaching philosophy? And my teaching philosophy is simple: get the students to play better golf. It's not one way fits all.
Yep.
So I try and learn as much as I can through the PGA training. I obviously go online. I look what some of the other top coaches in the world are doing. And basically, like a magpie, I take bits out from everywhere.
Yeah.
And the broader knowledge you can have of different teaching methods, you can then find one that fits the particular student you're working with.
I think the biggest takeaway that I got from years of coaching in China is accountability, right? Mm-hmm. Because I think a lot of the kids don't end up owning their shot, right? Good or bad, right? Yeah. Good or bad, right? Sometimes, if they hit a bad shot, they're like, oh, it's the caddy gave me the wrong club, or the caddy gave me the wrong line. Well, hold on, hang on a minute. You're the one putting.
At the end of the day, the final decision comes down to the person holding the club.
Exactly, right? The caddy's not forcing their putting that putt for you. You're the one putting.
Right.
So I think what that teaches the kid then is, okay, you need to own the shot. And then kind of like what you mentioned before is when you're out on the golf course by yourself, you got to make that decision then, right? How's that wind? And, I think the hardest part is learning how to accept good or bad shots. I think that's what I'm trying to say is acceptance is so hard because once you made that bad shot, your mind is going.
You have to deal with your mistakes.
Exactly. You're the, oh, why did I swing like that? Or, if the kid's not saying that, I know a lot of the parents on the side are saying, why did you swing like that? Well, it's like, wait, hang on a minute.
It's easy to make excuses.
Yes, right. Exactly. But I think accountability, owning that shot is very important. And it's part of what you keep mentioning about character building. Right. Because golf isn't just about scoring. It's about integrity.
Right.
It's about honesty, knowing the rules. It's about accepting. I think it's the most beautiful sport in the world for that same reason. It's how you live life, right? It's how you deal with problems in life.
Exactly.
And so I kind of want to shift gears into, you mentioned about your PGA training.
Right.
And how important that was. And you're a third generation professional.
Right.
How was your PGA training? How was that experience?
Like all young golfers, as a teenager, I represented the county. The next step up from that would, if I'd progressed as an amateur, would be to possibly try and get in the national team. I decided at 18 to actually start the PGA training because I felt as though if the playing side didn't work out, then I always had the teaching to fall back on. I was fortunate because my father had always had assistant trainee professionals working under him. So I used to do the club repairs. I used to sit with them while they were doing their training program. And so I had quite a good understanding of what was required before I actually started. So certain aspects of the PGA training I was doing from a very early age, 12, 13 years of age. I was, building golf clubs out of a block of wood.
Right.
Things like that. Because I had an interest. Of course, obviously, the club repair side of things has changed a lot now. But I knew that it was going to give me something to fall back on if I didn't make it as a full-time player. Secondly, at the age of 17, I actually started coaching. I was asked to help some schools coaching with a local professional. And so I got into coaching quite early at 17, and I found that I had a passion for it. I was very fortunate being in the golf industry from a young age with my father. My mother was a two-handicap golfer. My grandparents also played. So I felt as though I was giving something back. Not everybody has the same start in golf that I had. So I was lucky that I enjoyed it. And if you talk to any entrepreneur or any business person, they'll always say, find something that works for you, something that you like, something you have a passion in. So it's not like getting up every day, I've got to go to work. You're
excited
to do it. And after now is over 30 years of teaching golf, I still enjoy it. So
that's awesome.
Yeah,
that's
very
awesome.
Lucky.
Yeah, I think we're very fortunate to be in an industry where you're passionate about what you're doing, but then you're trying to pass that forward to the next generation. I think that's what keeps me going is knowing that the next generation is gonna take that torch and hopefully keep passing that torch on.
Fortunately, I say I've been very lucky with my time in China. I started off teaching quite a lot of children, and now to see some of those students either playing on the China tour, playing representing the country, playing for the national team, or following a different route and becoming coaches themselves, having their own golf academies. That's very rewarding, and that passion is because I started golf the right way. I was made aware of how hard you had to work. At the same time, it was never a job.
Yeah.
It was always, because I enjoyed it.
That's awesome. I mean, speaking of passing it forward, and Olympics.
Right.
Olympics are actually are happening again. A few years ago, it's only been reinstated. In 2016, Rio was the first one,
Right.
I believe. Did you ever, growing up, think it was going to be a part of the Olympics, or?
Growing up, obviously, sort of in the 80s and 90s, golf wasn't in the Olympics then. Having moved to China and golf being brought back into the Olympics, I was pleased because as long as golf is in the Olympics, China's obviously very strong in most other sports, and it's helped to keep golf involved, high profile in China, which I think is important because golf has so many benefits to the country. Mm-hmm. Employment, health, fitness, education.
Yeah.
So there's so many benefits. So if the top Chinese players are representing China in the Olympics, it brings more limelight to the sport.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think that, I think the Olympic, that's only like the third time that golf has actually been involved in
Right.
it. Do you like the format? Do you like how it's?
To be honest, I haven't followed it a lot, but I think for any player to represent their country at any point in their career is obviously a highlight.
For sure.
For me, one of my highlights, it wasn't the Olympics, but the first junior team from China to play in an overseas tournament. I was fortunate enough to take them to Japan, and they played against other countries, and that was the first, team to represent China overseas. So I was very pleased and honored to be part of that.
If you get called up to help train,
I'd be more
that-
than happy. To be honest, I tend to take a back seat a little bit from national training and things like this, but I see my job now is to just be there to support and develop young players who can then potentially get into that situation.
what's been the biggest philosophy or advice that you've received that helped you the most?
Oh, that's a big question. In teaching golf, obviously my father was the biggest influence. The amount of advice given by him over the years was probably the most valuable advice. Not always well received. As a teenager growing up, like a lot of teenagers, I was quite rebellious and always thought I knew better. But I think the advice I would pass on now is find a qualified coach, find somebody with a proven track record, find somebody who has time to work with your child or with yourself, and find someone who has the qualifications. It's still a very new market and quite early on in the development of golf, even after 30, 40 years. So getting the right advice is key.
And what sort of advice would you give up-and-coming coaches or coaches that potential players that want to be coaches?
Potential players, first of all, I would say if you're in your late teens, early 20s, give it a go. Because as you get older, you're not likely to get that chance again. If you don't make it and you decide to go down the coaching path, get yourself qualified. Invest in yourself, spend money. It doesn't matter what it costs.
Yeah, there was a quote that said like the only there's no guarantees in investment, but the only guarantee that you'll get in return is investing in yourself.
Right, that's right. So to do the PGA training, you're on a minimum salary as an apprentice. You have obviously living costs, tournament costs. You have your training costs, but all those are well worth investing in. For advice for junior golfers, I would say enjoy it. Don't do it if you're not enjoying it.
It's the greatest sport in the world.
It is fantastic. Yeah, yeah.
And I guess we're coming towards the end of our podcast. What would you give our next guest? What kind of question would you ask the next guest on our podcast is what I'm trying to say.
If you're going to be interviewing another golf coach, I would ask them similar questions: why they came to China, what their conceptions were of China beforehand, what they hope to do in the industry, and see if they have achieved any of their goals.
All right. So towards the end of our podcast now.
Right.
Rapid fire questions.
Okay.
Favorite golf course in China?
Clearwater Bay, because it reminds me of one or two of the courses I used to play in Wales before I came out to China.
That's my favorite course as well. Yeah. I got married there.
Did
actually.
You?
I did, yeah. I got married there. Best meal you've had in China?
Oh, without a doubt, Chinese food. I like Guangdong food, so any Guangdong food, but I also like spicy food, so Sichuan or Funan Thai.
That's awesome. One thing you miss about the UK?
Family.
That's always a big one.
Always the big one. Fortunately, you know, with WeChat and various forms of social media, you can keep in touch, but it's always good to see family when you go back.
Always, always. Well, Andrew, it's been a pleasure.
Thanks, Jason.
Love to do this again.
Sure, we'll do it anytime.
That's awesome, and I hope some of our viewers have learned something here or there. Right? Just like in golf, it's about the process.
Right, very
Not
true.
necessarily about the results all the time.
Yeah.
Although the results are important, but
yeah,
the process of how to get there is just as important.
Sure.
Thank you,
Good
Andrew.
stuff. Okay,
Thank you.